Imagine you are in the familiar comfort of your daily routine, perhaps finishing breakfast or glancing at the day's to-do list. It's an average morning, and the thought of anything disastrous happening seems absurd. But beneath this sense of security, there's an insidious bias at work. One that can cloud judgment, prompt poor decisions, and even risk lives. This cognitive pitfall is called the normalcy bias, a phenomenon that lulls us into believing that life will always follow its usual course, no matter what warnings may arise. Consider Emma, a meticulous planner who lives in an earthquake-prone area, yet dismisses the importance of preparing for such an event, trusting instead that her life will remain unshaken. This confidence falters only when a tremor suddenly shakes her apartment, transforming her tranquil environment into a trap. Emma's misplaced certainty reflects the essence of the normalcy bias, a belief that disasters happen to others, that life will continue undisturbed. This bias isn't just confined to natural calamities, but colors our responses to threats across health, finances, technology, and beyond. It's a blind spot that can prevent both individuals and institutions from taking necessary precautions, leading to avoidable consequences. Our inclination to brush off potential dangers often leads to underestimating signs that disrupt our comfort zone. A person might notice unusual health symptoms, but assume they'll disappear on their own, or observe a dip in their investments, but resist taking action, confident that the market will right itself. Even on a larger scale, government and corporate entities can fall prey to this bias, under-preparing for crises that, with foresight, could have been mitigated. For instance, when Winter Storm Uri hit Austin, Texas in 2021, the city was woefully unprepared, having underestimated the possibility of such a severe storm. This oversight cost the city dearly, with residents left without heat, water, and electricity. Similarly, cybersecurity lapses often stem from a relaxed approach to digital threats. Many of us have skipped reading privacy policy updates, or let antivirus software lapse, unconcerned because we've never experienced a breach. In the business world, the normalcy bias stifles innovation by trapping decision-makers in old paradigms, leaving them unprepared for market shifts. This was notoriously the case with Blockbuster, whose leaders, convinced that people would always prefer browsing in-store, famously declined to buy Netflix. By clinging to outdated assumptions, Blockbuster missed its chance to evolve and remain relevant, ultimately sinking under the wave of streaming services that now dominate entertainment. What drives us to cling to such comforting but false assumptions? The answer lies deep within our psychology. We base expectations on what we already know, a process called inductive thinking, where past experiences shape our beliefs about future events. Conversely, deductive thinking requires a leap from the known to the unknown, forcing us to recognize possibilities beyond our everyday experience, a daunting and uncomfortable task. Humans have a strong inclination toward optimism bias, expecting good things to happen and underestimating the bad. Someone pushing through a burnout-inducing work project, for example, may downplay the physical and mental consequences, assured that they can soldier on unscathed. This optimism can be reinforced by confirmation bias, where we seek out information that aligns with our current beliefs. Like Blockbuster's executives, who trusted in their customers' loyalty to in-store browsing, we often ignore evidence that challenges our expectations. Another force behind the normalcy bias is the desire for social proof. When others around us remain calm in the face of potential danger, we tend to follow their lead. In studies on disaster preparedness, people are more likely to heed warnings and evacuate only after consulting multiple sources, such as friends or news reports, making sure others see the threat as credible before acting. This group reassurance helps maintain social harmony, but can lead to delays in response during emergencies. Additionally, the concept of cognitive dissonance explains why we resist the idea of impending disaster. When we sense a contradiction between our belief in a safe world and an imminent threat, we tend to downplay the risk to resolve the dissonance. When airlines remind passengers to check safety cards or sports event waivers enumerate potential dangers, we often ignore these warnings. Repeated exposure dulls their urgency. Much like the story of the boy who cried wolf, after too many warnings, we become desensitized, diminishing their potential impact. This complex interplay of psychological factors makes the normalcy bias a persistent feature of human behavior, one that leads to inertia in both personal and collective actions. In fictional portrayals, characters often spring into action during crises, but in reality, most people respond with hesitation or calm, reflecting the normalcy bias's paralyzing effect. Such responses have inspired research into the differences between real-life crisis management and the rapid, decisive reactions we're accustomed to seeing in films. Studies consistently show that in moments of unexpected upheaval, people are more likely to cling to routine behaviors and deny the severity of the situation, rather than acting swiftly. Overcoming the normalcy bias requires awareness and mental agility. Acknowledging that misfortune can befall anyone is the first step toward preparedness. This is not easy. We are naturally inclined to avoid thoughts that disrupt our sense of optimism or security. However, taking a broader view, with contingency plans and emergency preparations, provides us with practical tools to act effectively should the unexpected arise. Notably, psychologists suggest strategies to encourage broader thinking. For example, making multiple forecasts for future scenarios, best case, worst case, and most likely, can prompt us to consider a range of outcomes. The COVID-19 pandemic was a global-scale illustration of the normalcy bias. At the onset, many clung to the belief that life would soon revert to normal, even as case numbers and death tolls surged. This wishful thinking led many to ignore safety measures, convinced the virus wouldn't affect them. As the pandemic wore on, studies showed that people who hadn't personally witnessed its effects continued to downplay the danger. Interestingly, the normalcy bias also has a flip side. While it often hampers preparation, the bias's inverse, catastrophic thinking, can spur us into preemptive action. At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, people panic-bought supplies like toilet paper and canned goods, a reaction driven by fear of shortages. For some, the pandemic spurred a newfound interest in prepping, or preparing for disaster scenarios, which may seem extreme, but offers valuable lessons in being proactive. You don't need to hoard supplies, but keeping an emergency kit and thinking through responses to potential scenarios can be empowering steps that circumvent the normalcy bias. The real challenge lies in finding a balance. Adapting to potential threats doesn't mean expecting the worst. It means recognizing that unusual events do occur and preparing accordingly. Making contingency plans, whether that means setting aside emergency funds, preparing evacuation routes, or backing up critical data, helps counteract the bias and fosters a mindset that is both resilient and realistic. This way, when life does veer off course, we are not only prepared but empowered to navigate the uncertainty. The normalcy bias might be a psychological blind spot, but with conscious effort, it's one we can overcome. By engaging in thoughtful planning, recognizing cognitive pitfalls, and adopting a flexible outlook, we can safeguard ourselves against complacency. Life may not always follow a predictable path, but a little foresight can turn potential crises into manageable challenges. With a proactive mindset, we can move beyond the biases that would otherwise limit us, preparing not only for what's likely, but for the unexpected twists that might one day shape our world. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.